We are joined today by Stanley Jordan, the highly innovative and influential jazz guitarist known for his unique two-handed tapping technique. How are we doing today, Stanley?
Oh man, I'm doing great, Kevin. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. It's raining. The rain is,
Mhm.
I know we need the rain, but sometimes I wish it wasn't.
And where are you with all this
I, I,
rain?
I am in Baltimore.
Baltimore. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
just the other. Mhm.
I was wondering because we're going to get to this. Maybe I'm,
Mhm.
you know, letting the cat out of the bag. But you're playing in DC. That's why I
Yes.
thought maybe you were in this area.
Right. Not there yet, but I will be next week. Well, this weekend actually.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
week, later this week. Yeah.
Right. So throughout your career, you've collaborated with numerous renowned musicians. You've released a diverse range of albums exploring various musical styles, jazz, fusion, classical. One of those collaborators being Phil Lesh, bassist for the
Mhm.
Grateful Dead. When we saw you had shows lined up for this weekend, billed as Stanley Plays the Dead, we had to reach out. So why don't we jump in with how you came to the Dead as a younger person and how your participation with Phil happened?
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the late '60s and early '70s. So excuse me. So this was, such an important formative time for me and of course for the Grateful Dead's music and their influence. And although I was pretty young at the time and we didn't actually live in San Francisco, if we had lived in San Francisco, I probably could have snuck out and gone to a lot of their shows. But we lived down the peninsula in Palo Alto, and I would hear about it on a regular basis. Oh man, the Dead just did this, they just did that. And a really good friend of mine was really talking to me a lot about Jerry Garcia and really getting me to understand what an amazing guitarist Jerry was. And, I had sort of come from a rock direction and I was into Hendrix and I was moving into jazz. And so I especially liked any artists who were kind of in the sort of rock genre, but had a jazz sensibility to what they were doing. Could, for example, improvise over chord changes or playing melodies and not just riffs. And I really liked Jerry's tone and his so musical melodic concept. And to me, that was an important part of kind of the soul of the Grateful Dead's music. And the fact that there's all this sophistication going on in the music, but it's not like hitting you upside the head. It's like it's subtle. And so, like, when I started to really consider their music a little bit more, I started to notice some of those subtleties, and I realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here that everyone just sort of knows. Like, at a certain point, like when I started playing with people who were steeped in that music, I didn't know what I was doing at first, and all of a sudden, everyone goes da 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 da, like there's all these little cues and all these little things that are just a part of the language that I confess I'm still learning. It's a huge songbook. It's such a big endeavor, but
Mhm.
I'm doing this band now. I know you wanted to talk about the
No,
origins at
no,
first,
wherever we're going, we're going.
but okay, like the music, right? But
Right.
yeah, this band has been kind of a culmination of that. I first met Phil because he was celebrating his son's graduation from Princeton. I think it was Brian was graduating from Princeton. And I was at reunions because I graduated from Princeton in '81. And I was at reunions and somebody said, hey, Phil Lesh is playing at Terrace Club. Well, Terrace Club, I used to live at Terrace Club. That's for my last 2 years of college. That was my home. Like really? Phil Lesh is playing in the backyard at Terrace Club? Like, this is amazing. I have to go there right now. So I went there. And of course, I always have my guitar. And a couple of the musicians recognized me and they introduced me to Phil. And I ended up sitting in the whole night that they played. And the funny thing about it too is their dressing room for the gig was my old room. so it was just, and I was sitting there with my friends, just kind of hanging out, just kind of in a chill vibe, and just going, who would have thought that like 30 years later we'd be here and Phil Lesh would be playing right here. But then again, of course, it makes perfect sense. And then since then, I've been invited to do some of the Phil Lesh and Friends shows, and it's been such an honor and such a privilege. I played at the Cap several times. I played at I think Brooklyn Bowl. It's called in I'm getting my cities jumbled up. I think
place.
It's in
Pete Shapiro's place.
in Albuquerque, maybe. Sorry if I don't have all the facts and figures. I've done a bunch of shows at Terrapin Crossroads, and I have so much nostalgia for the Terrapin Crossroads days as well. And I just recently played with Phil at the Fillmore. So like last year I did 2 different shows with Phil in San Francisco at the Fillmore. So this band has been kind of an offshoot of that, because since I started doing the shows with Phil, I really kind of had to get into the music more deeply and realize it's like diving into an ocean. It's so big.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing with my band is we're taking the music and taking it in our own direction, but not super far away from the original. It's sort of like, for example, I approach it the same way. For example, there's a piece that I often play by Mozart. It's one of the movements of one of his piano concertos, and I improvise on it and I put my own personal stamp on it, but I don't stray completely away from it, because I feel like there's so much in the original music that I don't have to. The music doesn't need my help in terms of like being great music, and so I can build on that foundation, but still put other things on top, take it in some other directions. So I feel like what we're doing is something that people who love Phil and love the Grateful Dead can appreciate, and they'll appreciate the time we put in to getting into the soul of the music, but at the same time, hear something different in it. And the people who've been listening to my music through the years and coming to my jazz concerts will hear that it's still me, it's just a different songbook.
Right. I was gonna say I heard an interview with you, and you had talked about, I think Stairway to Heaven was the song that was mentioned, but you said these are my generation standards. And the Grateful Dead, I'm sure, fall into that same thing.
Right. I did an album in the late 80s called Standards Volume 1. And the idea was just that it was going to be a solo record and just playing some of my favorite songs. I knew I wanted to feature other people's music. Then I started to notice that some of the kind of jazz police, like jazz critics, were giving me a lot of flack for some of the songs that I was playing. Because the whole thing is you're supposed to play, the Great American Songbook, Tin Pan Alley, Van Heusen,
Oklahoma,
Georgia on My Mind, and all those great songs, and yeah, I mean that's all great stuff, but no one gave me the memo that I was supposed to play old songs. All I knew is that, like for example, Art Tatum would play, I Can't Get Started, so then why can't I play, Stairway to Heaven? I didn't get that there's something wrong with that. So I was just doing that. And then I started getting flack. And I remember I started to feel kind of angry about it. And I was dreaming about that. And I was really kind of feeling my anger. And I wake up saying, damn it, these aren't some stupid pop tunes. These are standards. These are my generation standards. And they may not mean much to you guys, but they mean a lot to me. And I'm doing my music. So anything by the Dead could just as easily have been on that album.
Right, exactly.
Right.
It seems that, I mean, I might be totally off base, but it seems like a lot with jazz, there's gatekeeping going on, and it blocks the guy who doesn't want to think too much, who doesn't do too much about it, just likes music, from going in. The buy-in is too great,
It's sort of like, if I have to explain it to you, then you'd never understand, Well, how are they going to understand if you don't explain it, Or like, I mean, I don't want to go off into a tangent of like my beef with some aspects of the jazz world, but I'll just say this one other thing, okay? Like if you were an ET and you landed on the earth and people had already like screwed it up. You know, it's like that song like Morning Dew, and like there's basically no one left. And all you have is artifacts, and you go into a library and you find like books about jazz. Like, oh, interesting. What is this jazz thing? And so you're going to find all these books that tell you all about the music and who played what and who played on what album and all that kind of nuts and bolts kind of information. But you're not going to find anything in there to explain to you why you should care or why you should love jazz. And you know, it's not, I mean, it's assumed. So I get it. But, you know, if you're reaching out, if your goal is to reach out beyond that community, then you have to make an effort to do that. You know, I was talking with, I think it was Foley McCrary when he was playing with Miles Davis. We were talking about this same issue. And he said, well, Miles said, you have to educate the people, you know. And I think that Miles did a really amazing job of moving the music forward, and at the same time creating a context. I remember one time my mother was listening to this jazz show, this jazz station in Boston, and they did a whole special on Miles Davis. And she said, you know, I'm really sorry because I feel so stupid because they're saying that Miles he had all these different phases in his career, and I can't tell the difference. It all sounds the same to me. And I said, well, wait a minute. Tell me this. Are you focusing on this trumpet, or are you focusing on the whole band? She said, well, I'm focusing on the trumpet. And then I said, oh my God, that's an astute observation you just made, because the real truth is Miles actually didn't change his style. He went through all those different phases, and it's like a diamond in different settings, but it's still the same diamond.
Right.
You know, and so like he was one of those people who could reach out. Everybody knows about Miles, and there's something from Miles's period that anybody could relate to from his whole career. There's something, but he actually, you know, despite his reputation for being kind of aloof sometimes, the real truth is that he loved bringing the music to people and sharing the music with people and helping to educate them about the music.
Yep. My mother loves the first quintet. I couldn't get her to listen to Bitches Brew if my life depended on it. So,
and then on the corner, all that stuff. I remember that was around the same time that I was first starting to listen to the Grateful Dead, and it's like and behind that simple hook was the most ridiculous, dissonant, avant-garde harmonies coming at you from all directions, and this African groove, and just mind-blowing stuff. Yeah. And that was the environment that we were all in. And I remember, in fact, my guitar teacher, his niece was living in the city in San Francisco at the time, and she said, "Man, Miles played down here in San Francisco, and he turned the city upside down." You know, and so it's like this whole idea that a musician plays a role beyond just mixing the notes up in some different order and entertaining people or creating something that the critics will say qualifies for inclusion in a history book or something. There's something beyond that. The idea of a musician as contributing to the culture and contributing to how people view the world, how people see themselves. Like all of us in our own way, we're thinking like, is there anything that I can do in my world that's kind of like what Miles did? That was really cool. You know, I might be a trial lawyer, or I might be a chef or something. Let me put my own Miles spin on what I do, you know?
Right. I mean, he changed popular music 4 times, 5 times, maybe. We can't all do that. All right, let's circle around. You know, Miles, people love Miles because they want something creative. People love the Grateful Dead because they want something creative. People come to you because they want something creative. How do you feel that your unique approach lends itself to the music of the Grateful Dead?
Well, there's one thing I can alert your listeners to. Just yesterday, we released our first video. My band, Stanley Plays The Dead. And it is on my website. I mean, it's on my YouTube, so you can search for the Stanley Jordan official YouTube channel.
We'll get a link in the description for you.
Awesome. And we did Eyes of the World, and it's the whole band, and it was from our first rehearsals. And there's other stuff that we do that's even different from that. That's just, you know, chapter one. But I think that is a good song to start with, because I think it gives people a good sense of what I'm talking about, because we didn't radically change the music. It's definitely Eyes of the World. We love the original version, but there's something about how we soulfully funked it up and changed the groove a little bit. And then my guitar lines is really the main core of what this approach is. Mm-hmm. So when I hear those chords, and that was always one of my favorite songs to play with Phil too, because the chords allowed me to kind of come into the more of a jazz flavored bag. Those chord changes, some of my favorite chords and progressions. So it was very natural for me to play over that song. And so I didn't have to try real hard. I didn't have to, you know, scheme to do something weird or different with it. But I think people get the flavor of what I'm trying to do from that.
There you go. How do you keep your voice while staying true to the music? How do you walk that tightrope?
Well, a lot of what it is, yes, there is an element of balance that is true. But the way I think of it is a little different. I think of it not so much like tightrope, like left and right, as I think of it more like external versus internal. And where I get the core of my inspiration from is more on an internal level. So like if I hear something that comes into my ears and then it goes in there and it starts, you know, there's some process that's mysterious. We don't understand it, but then it gets transformed. And on the inside, I hear a continuation of that, or I hear an answer to that, or I hear an embellishment of that, or a further, like, okay, what would come after that? You know, so like, for example, let's say if I'm playing a song like, well, take Eyes of the World, for example. Okay, so Jesse HIATT does the vocals, and so he sings like the verse and the chorus. We've got, you know, background vocals and stuff. And then I come in and I just imagine, well, what should follow that? In other words, instead of thinking like, okay, good, we got the head out of the way, now I can blow and do my solo. It's like, no. What's a continuation of that? And that has to come from the inside, from internalizing the music. So basically what I do is I trust that mysterious process on the inside, and I let that basically inform me where to go next. Right. It's almost like yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's almost like you know, people do like an automatic writing thing where they kind of go into a trance and then they just write, or they channel these different, you know, archangels or whatever. You know, it's a similar experience to what I imagine they go through. It's like I'm tuning in to something that feels like it's beyond me, but maybe it's just me, just deep down, or maybe it's my connection to an archetypal consciousness or something. I don't know how to describe it.
The spirit of the elders is what my friend calls it.
Mm-hmm,
You're communing with the spirit of the elders.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And maybe there's even an element where you know, Jerry, as one of our elders that's passed on, can speak to us through the ethers or something, and we can pick up on some of his energy too. I don't know. It's all so mysterious. I don't have the answers to this, right. But I just know that inside of the mystery, there's a lot of opportunity for growth and for bliss and to help each other go deeper. You know, I think that we need the music to play this role of making people go deeper, because everything is so superficial right now. Mm-hmm. And even areas that are like really crucial, areas that affect our lives in a really profound way. Like, for example, our political conversation is so superficial. They have this presidential race and it's all about the horse race. Meanwhile, you have candidates, Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr., Cornel West, all these people are trying to deepen the conversation, and people are like hitting them, like saying, no, 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 no. And you can agree or disagree with the things that they're saying. But what they have in common is they're trying to say, let's get off this superficial platform and go deeper.
Right. I would love if we had 5 parties. So you'd have to have a parliamentary thing. You'd have to get a couple groups to agree in order to be the people in charge.
That's working in a lot of places. And, okay, so we don't have that now. But, there's one thing that we can do along the way to get ourselves ready for that is we can start forming strategic coalitions, because that's what those people have to do, right? Maybe we can start forming coalitions with people who may not agree with us 100%, who may not pass our purity test, but agree with us in enough ways that we can form coalitions
70%.
and get shit done. You know what I mean? How about that?
Yeah. So you said Jesse was the one who was singing?
Jesse Hyatt, yeah.
Yeah, and he is your keyboardist, second guitarist in the band, correct?
Yes.
Cedric Burnside, I guess, is where I know him from. He spent some time with him. Also, you have Greg KOERNER.
Greg KOERNER. And Greg, Jesse and Greg are two experts on the Dead songbook, especially Greg. And Greg has played with a lot of bands doing Grateful Dead music, including Dark Star Orchestra, a bunch of different bands. So Greg knows every one of those little, nuances. Mm-hmm. And so he anchors us into the tradition. And Kenwood is just a monster drummer who can do anything. And he's been so influential to a lot of drummers and a lot of musicians, even of other instruments. He taught at Berklee College of Music for something like 20 years. He was a tenured professor and just retired last year. So, I got him. He's got time. He's got more time now to play with me, which is awesome for me.
I mean, he was one of the first in the jazz fusion movement in the 70s. I mean, he helped put that on the map and define what it was. It's amazing to me that you have him on board there.
Oh, what a blessing. And he also has his own Grateful Dead tribute band as well, Grateful Groove. Okay. And so that's one of the things that it's sort of like, it's like a unit. It's like there's already a unit of people in my band that have their own band. And so it just makes the whole thing tight. And by the way, just so you know, one of my concepts with this band is we're very open to having people sit in. So you never know, even on our upcoming shows, which I haven't mentioned yet, but it's April 4th and 5th at Blues Alley in DC. It's our first performances. I am so excited. And a little nervous.
And it's 2 shows each night. Two shows each night, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been doing rehearsals. Maybe you can give us a peek as to some other names that might pop up. But how did you choose the song when you have a huge catalog like the Dead did?
We choose it based on criteria. And so one of the things is we want to do not just their compositions, but some of the songs that they played frequently. In fact, you know what? Can you hold on just a second? I've got a song.
I can hold on.
Okay, I'll be right back.
All right. This is what you call dead air.
All right. I'm back. So I do kind of need to keep an air of mystique here. So I'm not going to just read down the whole list. But there are some great songs I'm looking at right now. For example, some of their medleys, like China Cat, I Know You Rider, that's one that we've been practicing. Help on the Way, Slipknot, Franklin's Tower, this is stuff that I've had some wonderful memories playing that stuff with Phil.
Right.
Morning Dew is another song that's we're considering. Okay.
All right.
And you know, this is just the beginning. We would like to have a big songbook and make every set unique. And, you know, in fact, what they call the jam band scene, you know, where did that start, you know? And
Right.
and I mean, one of the things that Phil specifically has told me, and I was glad to hear this, that this was a conscious decision. He said, you know, we decided early on that we were going to have a big songbook so that people would have a reason to keep coming back again and again. And what an innovative idea. I mean, it takes a lot of discipline, of course, as a musician, a lot of work, but one of the effects of that is that this whole community form, like I was talking about earlier, like what role can a musician play beyond just entertainment and artistic value? Can musicians make a contribution to the community? And clearly the Grateful Dead did that. I mean, I tell you, when I first really got that is I saw them a couple of times in California with Jerry in 95. And I remember going outside the venue and walking around and seeing that this whole like city sprung up like around the venue, right? And so it's like a lot of these people probably were people who would travel around and follow the Dead on tour. And so they would form a community and they would buy and sell within that community, you know, and so this is just like, you know, anthropologists. I mean, I hope that anthropologists are onto this. They're screwing up if not, you know.
Right. Well, you know, famously Joseph Campbell, who wrote, you know, all that stuff about myths and all that, went to see the Dead and said, you know, likened it to the Russian Easter dance. You know, the Russian Easter ceremonies where everyone was dancing in rapture and a lot of the songs, you know, a lot of the songs like Terrapin Station is the hero's journey. I mean, it's like the Odyssey or something, put to modern music, you know.
Right. We did this version of that. I don't know if you heard it, but just a couple of years ago, a bunch of people did a version of Terrapin Station, and everyone contributed a different piece to it, and then the whole thing got sort of edited together into one.
Oh, I have to look for that. Interesting. So you have the 4 shows, and then your schedule has lots of other stuff, some solo stuff, some stuff with your quartet, I guess, far out. And then I guess maybe in July or something, there is another Stanley Plays the Dead pops up. So I'm assuming that maybe more dates are in the works for people outside of the Baltimore, DC area.
Yes, definitely more dates in the works. And I know that my agent is talking to a lot of venues about this, and there's been a lot of interest. And my schedule is kind of full this year, so it's a little hard to figure out when to squeeze that in. So I think most likely we could maybe get a couple things in this summer, but then I think starting in November we'll have more time. Right. So if we do like a whole like tour, the earliest possibility would be probably November.
There you go. Do you know if they're going to be able to stream it, or this is at Blues Alley, right?
Yeah, so Blues Alley in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., April 4th and 5th. And yeah, it's our first
right. I don't know if they
voyage.
I don't know if they have cameras set up to stream there. I used to love the Bayou. Did you ever get to play the Bayou in Georgetown?
No, never played there.
Yeah, it was a dump, but it was a cool place to go. I was in love with one of the bartenders, so I used to go there quite often just to hit on the bar. Hey, whatever it takes to get people in the door, huh? All right. Is there anything else you want to throw out?
Wow. Well, where I am right now is kind of cool. I don't know how easy it is to see, but I'm actually in a church. Nice. And I was here yesterday for Easter, but our vocalist and pianist, guitarist, Jesse HIATT, this is his studio. Oh. And so we're rehearsing here in an undisclosed location and somewhere in upstate New York. and it's a converted church, and you can just feel the spirit here. So this is the environment where we've been preparing the music for this, and it's perfect. And I really felt that yesterday on Easter. I really felt all of those times that people have come into this building and they just bared their soul and they confessed and they helped each other and they got out of their rut and thought about something higher, the highest that they can possibly think about, has all happened in this room for years and years. And to me, like the Grateful Dead and their music, the main significance of it is that it's something that's spiritual. That's the key that I get most from it. So that song that we did, Eyes of the World, is one of the best ways of explaining that, you know, and it's a concept that it's some kind of a perennial concept that many different cultures have understood, but part of our connectedness to the world, that the world sees itself through us, you know. And I remember I tapped into that in the poetic commentary for one of my albums, State of Nature. I got into these nature themes, which Eyes of the World also touches on. And one of my poems, it ends something like, it's about us, and it ends like, how else can the stars come to know the stars, you know? And so it speaks to our connectedness, but this goes beyond just pure nature mysticism, because there's a emergent consciousness that we bring to it that's beyond what was there before. And yet when we're contemplating nature and connecting ourselves and also revering nature and not being in denial about the 6th grade extinction and global warming and all that stuff, but really trying to take responsibility, like how am I able to respond to this? Then we tap into, I think the ultimate goal of what spirituality should do is that it should inspire right action, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir.
No, you're not. You're preaching to the choir. Is what you're doing.
But hopefully the congregation will hear the message as well. And so that's the main thing that we're trying to do is to bring some spiritual inspiration and try to help to people get off of that superficial approach to the world and approach it deeper and take more responsibility and maybe take more risk and figure out what can I do to make this world better.
Right. Eyes of the World always reminded me a lot of the Native American religious, for lack of a better term, spirituality kind of thing, that God is in a blade of grass as much as he is in the person sitting next to you, you know. So it's beautiful. That's why it changed my life finding them. You know, when I was young, I was 12, 13. Someone was like, oh, check this out. And I was like, that doesn't sound like AC/DC.
Well, I've just been talking, but I would love to hear more about your story and how you got to where you are. Maybe in another time we'll have more time, but
yes, no, I was going to say, I know you're rehearsing today. I would love to have you back on sometime. Maybe have my co-host Amanda here, and I would love to go through some of your other stuff. I mean, how you tune your instrument, you know, how the approaches and things like that, and some of your collaborations. I mean, I've heard you played with Dizzy Gillespie at one point, and that just fascinates me.
KENWOOD, our drummer KENWOOD DENNARD played with Dizzy a lot more than I did, actually.
Right. What wasn't your story something about? Wasn't your story something about Princeton? Didn't it have go back? Can we circle it back around to Princeton?
Right, because Benny Carter was he taught at Princeton for one semester, and what a treasure! I mean, he goes back to Louis Armstrong's generation, and
connections to the past, those bridges,
and you hear the history of that old story in his notes, and yet he also had such a modern sound as well. And he was definitely someone who spanned multiple generations of music. And it was in collaboration with Mauro Berger it was an interdisciplinary course between the music department and the American Studies department. So Mauro Berger was a professor of American Studies. So needless to say, I took the course. And when Mr. Carter was doing office hours, I kind of timidly came in with my guitar, and he had his horn there. And I said, hey, I'd like to, show you some of the stuff I do. And I started playing for him, and he got out his horn, and we started playing together. And this was 2 days before this concert with Dizzy Gillespie as a visiting performer. And so I asked, do you think I could maybe sit in when you guys play? And so I ended up doing that. And this was, I think, my sophomore year. So by that point, I had already done enough gigs around campus to where a lot of people already knew who I was. And so when I looked out in the audience, these were my friends. I had so much love and support from my friends. How could I not have an awesome time?
It's a beautiful thing. It's fantastic. But yeah, again, that's the bridge to the elders. It's the continuum, really fantastic stuff there. Do you let me get one more thing. Let me ask you, do you tune? How do you translate the Grateful Dead's songs to the tuning on your guitar? Or are you using a special tuning to play the Grateful Dead songs?
I normally use a tuning called perfect fourths or P4 or all fourths. And it's E, A, D, G, C, F. So those two, the CF, are a half step higher than the conventional Spanish tuning. And I've been doing that ever since the mid-'70s. So that's just how I normally tune. Right. And it works fine for this. The tuning doesn't really matter so much because I'm not copying stuff like, exactly note for note. And I am trying to sort of channel the sensibility of Jerry, but through my own kind of, electrochemical circuitry of my own physical body, and my sensibility and psychology and consciousness, but I still try to channel some of that. And by the way, I feel, and I've never heard anybody mention this, but I feel that Jerry was probably influenced by Les Paul, who was another one of my guitar heroes. Right? Interesting thought, right?
Yeah, that is.
And so there's a continuity there again from the elders.
Right. And he played a Gibson early on before he started getting into a lot of the weirder things. That Travis Bean guitar. Have you ever seen this Travis Bean guitar he had in the late 70s that was aluminum? It had an aluminum neck.
It's funny because I played a Travis Bean. When I first started getting into the two-hand touch technique, I developed it on a cheaper model guitar, and then I was looking for a higher quality instrument. And so I ended up buying my Travis Bean from Draper's Music Center in Palo Alto. And my teacher, Elmer Jones, he was kind of saying, hey, you guys should, let Stanley, do an endorsement. You should work out an endorsement deal with Stanley. I was only 15 at the time, but he was building me up, I was like, I appreciated that. And they said, well, Jerry Garcia was just in here and he bought 3 of them. So we don't really need another endorser.
That's what we need, right? Right. We all need cheerleaders though, definitely. And it's good that you had that. Elmer Jones was his name, right?
Elroy.
Elroy Jones, right. I've seen his name pop up, doing research about San Francisco and stuff like that. I do not know much about him. Was he in bands or was he just a teacher, mentor?
There was a period before I knew him when he was active in the San Francisco music scene. Okay. And he used to tell me stories about how he was leading a big band and arranging for horns and all this stuff. So he knew a lot of cats who would come in to San Francisco, and so he was definitely very much a part of that scene. But there was also a lot of that scene that was unhealthy, and for his own choice, he decided to move down the peninsula and get out of the racket, as it were.
Right.
And he ended up, that's a whole other story, but he was really brilliant, super brilliant, right, and could just pretty much talk his way into or out of any situation. And so he basically talked his way into all these high-tech jobs in Silicon Valley. And he convinced them that he knew all this stuff. And And he figured, well, by the time they figure out I don't know what I'm talking about, hopefully
I'm
I'll make the first couple of paychecks. And then by the time they figured out that he didn't have the education that he claimed, he was already doing so well that he stayed on. He kept those jobs. And I remember one time he got a job doing integrated circuit failure analysis, quality part of the quality assurance department at Fairchild Semiconductor. And I went over expecting to play some music, and he had like all these charts of like semiconductor data on all over the table. And he's like, man, little brother, I need some help. I gotta learn about these integrated circuits by tomorrow. I start this new job tomorrow. So we sat down poring over these charts and graphs of semiconductors, and he kept that job for I think at least 5 or 6 years. Just brilliant.
I love it.
Brilliant.
I love it. You were an early adopter of technology. You made the classic Apple sound, didn't you?
Yes. So that came about because in '94, a lot of people. You were cutting out. Can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm not. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So around '94, I think a lot of people were saying, "Oh, Apple Computer's going to go out of business." And I had a Mac, and I had this thing. I used to buy Macs for people. I'd like to buy the world a Mac. I was just really a big supporter. And so what happened was somebody saw my computer and he said, "Man, 6 months from now, that company is going to be out of business." And I was like, "Ooh, I hope not." So I decided to go to their main campus of the building, the Infinite Loop building in Cupertino. And I went there and I did a lunchtime concert pep talk. And I basically played for the company and I said, "Hey, keep up the good work. A lot of people out here really appreciate what you guys are doing." And then afterwards, I was approached by Will Oxford, who was running their audio division. And he said, "Hey, we got this new computer coming out. We'd like you to do a boot beep," which is the name for the startup sound. Mm-hmm. So I ended up doing that. And I consulted with, the name escapes me now, but Larry, the chief scientist at the time. You could have to look it up.
Yep.
Chief scientist at Apple. And I said, "What do you want the world to know about these new computers and about Apple as a company?" And I took everything he told me and tried to boil that down into that sound, because that sound is the first thing the computer does when you turn it on. And these were the first Power PCs. And so, maybe another time I can go more into the details of it, but the Power PCs were enormously successful. It did bring Apple back up, and the rest is history. And I like to think that I made some sort of a contribution to that through my little sound, and it was kind of unique. It was mostly acoustic guitar, not
people have to Google it, but you can find it. Maybe I'll find a link on another YouTube of the sound itself. Because when people hear it, they'd be like, "No way, you did that?" Kind of thing. All right. I think we're gonna step back. We're almost at 45 minutes. I know you have rehearsals today, but we are going to be in touch, and I would love to spend some more time with you. You're so giving. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin. I enjoyed talking with you, and we will do this again sometime.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Okay, the stream will take